Ever wish you could just, soak up knowledge? Especially for something practical like getting better at speaking English.
Oh, definitely.
Yeah.
That idea of quick, efficient learning is something everyone wants.
Right. Like imagine just getting how native speakers sound, the rhythm, the flow, without hours and hours of textbook stuff.
And that efficiency, that desire to communicate better, is really universal. People are always looking for those methods that actually work.
Absolutely. Which brings us nicely to what we're digging into today. It's a technique called shadowing.
Ah, shadowing, yeah.
No, it's not about spies or anything. In language learning, it's simpler. You listen to some audio, maybe a conversation, and you try to repeat it almost immediately after you hear it, like right on its heels.
Like being an echo.
Exactly, but like an echo with feeling. You're not just copying words. You're trying to match the speaker's pronunciation, their rhythm, the way their voice goes up and down, the intonation.
And what's really fascinating is how it makes your brain work. It's not passive at all, is it?
Not at all. You're actively listening, processing, and producing the sound almost at the same time.
Which, neurologically speaking, could really help forge stronger connections for language.
And the benefits, well, they can be pretty significant. We're talking better listening skills. You start catching those little things you missed before.
Right. Understanding becomes more intuitive.
Plus, it's brilliant for pronunciation, getting your mouth around those English sounds and rhythms.
It really exercises those speech muscles.
Which all leads to, hopefully, better fluency. Speaking more smoothly, more naturally.
Yeah, by trying to copy native speakers, you sort of internalize how English flows. Built confidence, too.
So for this deep dive, we found a really interesting source. It's a podcast episode called Shadowing English Speaking Practice Learn English Podcast.
Okay.
And in it, the hosts, Emma and Jake, they guide listeners through different shadowing exercises.
So they're demonstrating the technique.
Exactly. So our mission today is basically to walk through that practice, experience it a bit ourselves, and really unpack why shadowing works, like what's going on.
Think of it as our own little meta exercise. Shadowing the Shadowing Podcast.
Yeah. We're learning about learning, basically.
Okay, sounds good. Where do they start?
Right. So the Source podcast, it kicks off with shadowing a pretty standard everyday conversation. Normal speed.
Just natural chat.
Yep. Gets you used to how English actually sounds day to day. It's between the hosts, Emma and Jake, talking about their weekends. Let's hear it. Emma says, "Hi, Jake. How was your weekend?"
And Jake, "Hey, Emma. It was great, thanks. I went hiking in the mountains."
Emma, "That sounds fun. Was the weather nice?"
Jay, it was sunny and warm. Perfect hiking weather.
Emma, "Did you go alone?"
Jake, "No, I went with some friends. We had a picnic at the top."
Emma, "Wow, that sounds amazing. I stayed home and watched movies."
Jake, "That's great too. Everyone needs a relaxing weekend sometimes."
Okay, so the idea, as you listen, is to try repeating each line right after you hear it, instantly.
Don't worry too much about perfection at this stage, right?
No, not at all. Focus on the flow, the speed, the rhythm. Try to mimic how they say it. What jumps out when you try that cold at normal speed?
Well, it immediately throws you in, doesn't it?
Yeah.
You instantly notice the gap between maybe how you think English sounds and how it's actually spoken quickly.
Like words blurring together.
Yeah, exactly. Or maybe intonation patterns that feel a bit strange at first. It kind of highlights where the challenges might be for you.
That's a good way to put it. It's like your ear and your mouth are playing catch up. So then the original podcast does something really helpful. They take the same conversation and slow it right down. A lot slower. Let's hear that version. Emma, "Hi, Jake. How was your weekend?"
"Hey, Emma. It was great, thanks. I went hiking in the mountains."
Oh, sounds fun. Was the weather nice?
Yeah, it was. Sunny and warm. Perfect. Hiking weather.
Emma, did you go alone?
Jake. No, I went with some friends. We had a picnic at the top.
Emma, wow, that sounds amazing. I stayed home and watched movies.
Jake. That's great, too. Everyone needs a relaxing weekend sometimes.
Wow, you can really hear everything individually there, can't you?
Totally different experience. It gives your brain breathing room.
So you can process each syllable, maybe focus on a tricky vowel sound, or try and match the pronunciation much more closely. What's the cognitive benefit of slowing it down like that?
Well, that slower pace lets your brain do some really detailed phonetic processing. You have more time to actually register how the speaker is forming the sounds.
Like the mouth movements.
Exactly. And this helps improve your own articulation. It also helps you distinguish between sounds that might sound really similar at normal speed. Like, think of it as slow motion replay for your ears and your mouth.
That makes sense. Okay, so after contrasting the speeds, the podcast then pulls out some specific common phrases from that conversation.
Like chunks of language.
Yeah, exactly. Things like, how was your weekend? Yeah, that sounds fun. Perfect hiking weather, and everyone needs a relaxing weekend.
Practical stuff.
And they encourage just repeating those phrases on their own. Why focus on these whole chunks instead of just words?
Well, because that's often how we speak, isn't it? We use these ready-made phrases. Practicing them as a unit helps you learn the natural rhythm and intonation for that specific phrase.
So it sounds less constructed?
Precisely. Less like you're translating word by word in your head and more like you're just pulling out the right conversational building block. Makes you sound more idiomatic.
Right. Okay. Then they get even more granular. They tackle specific pronunciation points.
Oh, interesting. Like what?
Well, they use the word mountains as an example, and they point out that often native speakers will say it more like mounds.
Yeah, that 10-sentence sound often gets reduced or even disappears. Mounds.
They even break it down slowly. Mound.tns. It seems like such a tiny detail, but is paying attention to that level really important?
Oh, absolutely crucial if you want to sound more natural. These kinds of reductions, like dropping sounds and consonant clusters, happen all the time in spoken English.
So if you pronounce every single letter clearly.
It can sound a bit stiff, maybe overly formal, or just not quite.
Yeah.
Practicing these reduced forms helps you tune into how the language is actually used.
Okay. And they also mention linking words together. The example was, I went with some friends.
Which often comes out sounding like, I went with some friends.
All run together. They suggest practicing saying it smoothly like that. How does that linking help the flow?
Linking is fundamental. It's what makes spoken English sound smooth rather than choppy. You connect the end sound of one word to the beginning sound of the next.
Like music notes running together.
That's a great analogy. It creates that fluid rhythm. Without linking, it can sound very robotic.
Gotcha. Okay, so after working on those sort of micro-level things, expressions, Pronunciation the Source podcast moves on to shadowing a short story.
Okay, a longer piece of text now.
Yeah, back at normal pace again. This gives you practice following connected sentences, a narrative. Here's the story. Last weekend, I woke up early and packed my bag for the hike.
I brought water, snacks, and a map.
The trail was quiet and peaceful.
Birds were singing, and the sun was rising.
When we reached the top, the view was beautiful.
We sat on the grass, laughed, and shared stories.
It was the perfect day.
Nice, simple story, easy to follow.
Right. And again, the task is immediate repetition, shadowing each sentence, trying to get the rhythm of the narrative. What's the extra benefit of shadowing a story versus just dialogue?
Stories help build your stamina, I think.
Yeah.
You're processing and producing longer chunks of language. Plus, you get exposure to how sentences connect logically and rhythmically to tell that story.
The flow is different from back and forth chat.
Yeah, the intonation pattern over a whole story, the pauses between ideas. It's a different kind of practice. Good for presentation skills, too, maybe.
Interesting point. And predictably, just like they did with the conversation.
They slow the story down, too.
You got it. Same story, but slower. For that detailed focus within the narrative context. Let's listen.
Last weekend, I woke up early and packed my bag for the hike.
I brought water, snacks, and a map.
The trail was quiet and peaceful.
Birds were singing, and the sun was rising.
When we reached the top, the view was beautiful.
We sat on the grass, laughed, and shared stories.
It was the perfect day.
Again, that clarity makes such a difference.
Doesn't it? You can really focus on how each word is said, where the emphasis falls in the sentence. It's like putting spoken language under a microscope. What should you, the listener, focus on during this slow story repetition?
Well, you can really hone in on the articulation of each word within the sentence flow. Notice how sounds change slightly when they connect to the next word. Pay attention to the stress patterns, the clarity. It's a chance to refine your own production.
Build accuracy and confidence within that longer flow.
Exactly.
Okay, so finally, the original podcast wraps things up with something they call a call and response challenge.
Sounds interactive. It is, but mentally. They ask you a question in English, pause, and you're supposed to think of a natural answer in your head.
Activating the language.
Yeah. The questions are things like, what did you do last weekend? Pause. Did you enjoy it? Pause. What's your favorite way to relax? Pause. And would you like to go hiking again? Pause. Why is this mental practice a good way to finish?
Because it bridges the gap between just repeating and actually using the language. It makes you search your own mental lexicon, pull out vocabulary, form a sentence, even if it's silent.
Like a rehearsal for a real conversation?
Precisely. It activates your productive skills in a low-pressure way. It gets you thinking in English.
So, looking back at the whole process in that Source podcast, it seems shadowing isn't just mindless mimicking, is it?
Not at all. It's really quite layered, very active.
You're engaging with sound, rhythm, meaning, pronunciation, all at once, almost.
And the structure they use, normal speed, slow speed, phrases, pronunciation, details, stories, then activation, it seems quite logical. Each step builds on the last.
Yeah, you get the real-world feel first.
Then the detailed breakdown.
Then you practice common chunks.
Target tricky sounds.
Build up to longer speech.
And try to use it yourself. It makes sense.
It really feels like it taps into how we naturally learn by imitation, but in a structured way.
A very active, embodied way.
Yeah.
More engaging than just reading grammar rules, I'd say.
So the big takeaway for you listening is, if you really want to improve your spoken English, your fluency, shadowing is a technique worth trying. Seriously powerful.
Yeah, it gets you doing both the listening and the speaking part simultaneously. And as we saw from exploring that podcast method, you can adapt it.
Right. You could use this deep dive, go back, shadow the sections we played.
Or find other audio you like, other podcasts, interviews, maybe even bits of audiobooks.
The more you practice, the better your ear gets and the more natural you'll likely sound.
Which leads to maybe a final thought for you to consider. How might adding regular shadowing practice actually change your confidence levels when you speak English?
Yeah, and thinking beyond today's examples, what other kinds of English audio could you personally use for shadowing? What would keep you engaged and learning on your own journey? Food for thought.